Flag party carry. Flags. Flag party by the center quick. March.
Hello and welcome to the Handsworth Remembrance Day Commemoration. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that our school and all of the locations you will see in today's presentation are on the traditional unceded ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh. We value the opportunity today to be able to learn, share, grow, and remember. Typically, our school community gathers in a formal assembly to mark this occasion. However, a global pandemic has meant that many of the traditions, events, and activities we have participated in the past have needed to be adapted. Our observance today is no exception. What remains important, though, is that we continue to honor and remember the sacrifice of veterans, both past and present, in our continued solemn observance of this day. I would now like to welcome Student Council Co-President Joy Wu to offer some words of observance.
Across Canada and in many other countries, people gather on November 11th to honor the courage and devotion of brave men and women who made the supreme sacrifice of dying for their country. The hostilities of the First World War ceased on November 11th, 1918, at 11 a.m., the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The following year marked the first observance of a day to remember and honor those who died, as well as to give thanks to the sacrifices of those who came back from serving their country. Since then, Canadians have fought in other conflicts, and many have given their lives so that we might enjoy freedom today. They too should be remembered. During Remembrance Day ceremonies, Canadians put all else aside to reflect on the sacrifices of servicemen, servicewomen, and that of their families who lost them to war. The theme of this year's remembrance is the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. We hope that you have the opportunity to reflect and learn about Canada's contribution to ending the major conflict and what part it has to Canadians' rich military history. At this time, please rise if you can for the singing of O Canada and the Coast Salish anthem, performed by the Handsworth Choir.
Today we have the fortunate privilege of being able to speak with not one, but two of our local veterans. Our first guest, Gwen Settle, comes to us virtually via the Memory Project, a volunteer speakers bureau that arranges for veteran and active members of the Canadian Armed Forces to share their stories of military service with school and community groups. Gwen was born in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and lived much of her life in various parts of Ontario, back to Nova Scotia, briefly in Calgary, then back to Ontario again, until finally moving to British Columbia in September of 1983. Abbotsford became her home in August 2000. Gwen's background is just as diverse as her moves. After serving as a naval operations wren in the Royal Canadian Navy, she has worked with a cattle breeding association, a wine and spirits agency, and a couple of steel plants, just to name a few, including running her own freelance legal secretarial business for several sole practitioners in Vancouver for more than a decade. Active in the community, she is the face, or rather the hat, of the Abbotsford Farm and Country Market, president of Friends of the Abbotsford Libraries, and past hospitality chair for Operation Red Nose. Gwen has a special bond with her granddaughter and participates in many of Gwen Jr.'s activities. Thank you to Gwen for making time for us today.
Well, on October the 15th, 1962, I went into Ottawa. I was living in Ontario, and I swore allegiance to Queen and Country and became a Wren in the Royal Canadian Navy. My name at the time was Gwendolyn Marie McDerby, and that was when I started my career in the Navy. I was sent to HMCS Cornwallis, which was the training base in Cornwallis, Nova Scotia. Spent 8 weeks there during basic training. That's where we did all kinds of physical and mental exercises. We were issued with our uniforms. We were shot up in both arms with all kinds of needles and so on. Learned to march. That I was very proud of. And that's where we got our trades. I was assigned naval operations. And so I became WONO, which was basically Ordinary Wren Naval Operations. Then I was sent for trades training in Halifax at HMCS Stadacona, where I learned about radar and sonar. And I was one of a select number of Wrens that was sent for specialized training in Key West, Florida. And that's where I learned the trade that I eventually came to have, which was, it was at various times called Naval Operations Radar Op, so on. It eventually became Oceanographic Researcher. It was top secret. And after an intensive 6 weeks of training in Key West, Florida, and this was during the time of the Cuban crisis. So we were only 90 miles from Cuba at the time when all that was happening. Then I was sent to Shelburne, Nova Scotia, where I served as Naval Operations Wren. When I finally finished my enlistment, I was WANO2, which meant I was an able Wren, which means I had done various stages of training, naval operations, and the 2 was for Trade Group 2, which meant that I had various firefighting, chemical, and defense courses, and I was higher level than, of course, when I'd started. So in that 2.5 years at Shelburne, I served change shifts every 3 days, and this went on and on. Our main job there, as I say, we couldn't talk to anybody about what we were doing. And when I started this, I was only 18 years old, and I was 21 years old when I got out. So I was still fairly young. And it was something I would never, ever, ever forget, and I would do it over again.
What do you remember most about your time in the service?
The camaraderie, the hard work. When I was stationed in Shelburne, this is the trade that I ended up with, was classified top secret at the time. And we couldn't talk about it even among anybody else on our base. It's now been declassified, so I can say what it was. And basically what I was doing, among a few other selected Wrens, was search for Russian submarines during the Cold War. And we had shifts every 3 days for, not every 3 days, every 3 days we changed shifts. And this went on for 2.5 years. So I'd work an 8-hour shift, 8 evenings, 24 hours off, 8 midnights, 24 hours off, 8 days, 72 hours off. And then it started all over again. And that was for 2.5 years.
And what's the REN, what that acronym is for?
It's based on the Women's Navy. When they were established and served during the wars, it was the Women's Royal English Navy. And when the Canadians started theirs, it was WRCNS. And of course, you couldn't pronounce that, so they still called us Wrens. But we were mentioning about one thing that remembered the most. At our base in Shelburne, Nova Scotia, which is where we did our specialized work, a lot of the young guys that had finished basic training and hadn't been assigned to a ship yet or so on were sent to our base so that they could do what they call Joe jobs, you know, just cleanup, maintenance, anything to keep them busy until they were assigned a ship. And unfortunately, some of the girls on the base just didn't have the time of day for them. They figured they were beneath them. But my buddy and I, we talked to everybody. We didn't, you know, everybody was equal. And we used to go, these guys and I used to go to the dances in town. There were the kids in town, and then Air Force fellows from the base on the other side of town used to come into the dances. And I found out later just the importance of how you treat someone comes back to you. Because later on, I was sent to the hospital in Halifax to have 2 surgeries on my face. And I didn't know really what to expect for the first one and so on. Well, while I was in the hospital for both those times, these guys who were now on ships or so on heard that I was in the hospital. They made a point of coming to visit me. And when I got out of the hospital, my face was all scabs and so on as it was healing. They took me out dancing. They took me to the movies. They took me out to walks. They made sure that I had someone with me and that I was never alone and that I was out among people. And I have never, ever forgotten that. So remember that, kids. How you treat people comes back to you, either good or bad. So treat everybody good.
How would you say that your service and experiences affected your life, your time in the military? What impact did that have on you later?
To see the benefit of discipline and order, have a good work ethic, Be proud of what I've done. I've been very, very proud that I spent time in the service. I wasn't in for very long. I was only in for 3 years, which at the time was 1 enlistment. But what I did was very, very important. And so I've taken that attitude all the way through my life, that what I have done is something to be proud of, no matter how small or how big. And just be proud of yourself and be proud of what you do. Remembrance Day to me means remembering the people that have sacrificed for this country. Not the politicians, not the provinces or so on, but for this country. I gave an oath to this country, and that oath doesn't get negated or just because I'm out of the service. And my father was in the Navy for 26 years, or pardon me, 23 years. My uncle was in the Navy. My aunt was in the Air Force during the war as a nurse. And my brother was in the Army from the time he was 16 years old. Every one of them has now passed on. But my father, even, he went in as a boy seaman, and he served on the corvettes that defended and protected the convoys in the North Atlantic during the war. And he was a gunnery officer. And Remembrance Day, to me, I give honor to all those people, the ones that didn't come back and the ones that did. And we mustn't forget the ones that are damaged by PTSD. That's really very serious too. And we mustn't forget them. We think of the veterans that are out on the street that have nothing, that are homeless. It's remembering all of them, male and female. And there is one thing I'd like to say, if I may. In 2013, in the fall, there was an article in Legion magazine, and I'd like to read a little bit from it at the end of it. The article was called "Serving in Silence," and it was about the trade that I did. It says, having stood their vigil in anonymity means that few know of the tremendous role these women played in safeguarding our nation during uncertain times. Oceanographic operators richly deserve recognition for their outstanding service and round-the-clock dedication to duty. And very few people actually know what we did, but I'm very, very proud to have been one of those women.
What role, if you could speak a little bit about it, does the Legion play in the life of veterans today?
They help veterans, the Poppy Fund, when they sell poppies, which will be going on sale on Friday, starting right up until Remembrance Day. They use those funds to help out veterans financially. They help with assistance with, they helped me find out how I could get my hearing aids through Veterans Affairs. They work as an advocate for veterans. They have had scholarships and bursaries for students who are relatives children or grandchildren of veterans. They advocate for veterans' rights. So the Legion does a great deal. And the Legion is hurting now with all these things being closed for COVID and so on. It's like everybody else, it's hard for them. But the Legion is very much in the life of working for veterans.
What would your appeal be to students to support the Poppy Fund? Why should they make sure they make a donation when they wear their poppy?
First off, I must say that poppies must be there. A lot of people wear them incorrectly. Poppies are to be worn over the heart, and treat it with respect. If after Remembrance Day, you can put your poppy on a cenotaph or on a grave, something, don't just toss it in the garbage. Helping with the Poppy Fund, you're helping your veterans. And it's a way to show respect. You may not have someone that you remember whoever served, but it shows respect for the people who have helped protect the rights that you've got. There's a lot of things that happened that you kids haven't lived through yet. Hopefully you never will have to, but realistically you might. Show respect for the people that have given their life, those who have served. It makes a difference when someone says thank you. Just a simple thank you makes a big difference.
Thank you, Gwen. Veteran Jim Roger served in the British Army in the early 1960s and now calls the North Shore home. Originally from Edinburgh, Scotland, Jim was kind enough to meet with us at the local Lynn Valley Legion number 114 to speak about his experiences as a service member. We're indebted to our local Legion, including chapter president Diana Sabo and Miss Donna Sorensen, for helping make this interview happen. What were the years you were in the service?
From 1960 to 62, 2 years. Abbreviation was RAOC. It's called the Royal Army Ordnance Corps. They supplied artillery and tanks and armaments to all troops and that all over the world, actually. And but during peacetime, it was just a matter of sending goods and transportation. And I didn't serve in any conflicts because when I did my national service, Britain had no wars going on, had no conflicts. They weren't fighting anybody. It's maybe little skirmishes in small countries and that, but nothing that people were boarded onto planes and shipped out to fight in conflicts. I was kind of lucky because most national servicemen, when they were called up, it was very hard to promote anybody as national service because they were only going to be in and out again, even though some of the captains and colonels that you worked with, if you were doing a good job, they wanted you to sign on and make a career in the Army, but I had no intentions of doing that. I just had finished an apprenticeship. But I was lucky that after basic training camp and trade school, I was awarded one stripe that was Lance Corporal. And I was in charge of a room, and I had my own room, and that made life a lot easier and a lot better for me in the Army if you have just that one. So I was rather fortunate that way for the last 18 months of my service. I was a machinist by trade with combustion engineers in Edinburgh, yeah. And I was in charge of 6 in a room, and they were all privates, and I had a room adjacent to them. And these soldiers had been in the Army for years and years and years, and they were still privates, you know, no rank, and whether that was their choice or not, I don't know. Maybe they wanted to stay privates, maybe they were offered a rank of some sort, but so when I was in charge. I went up the first time, and I got into my room and I went into them, and they were all there. And I says, "I'm your corporal in charge of your rooms and everything. Just a couple of things: keep it tidy, keep your beds made right, do the hospital things and that." And they says, "You take off. We've heard this so many times with young guys coming in, and we know what to do." And I says, "Okay, that's fine. Okay, do your thing, and I'll be right next door." So we were friends after that, you know. And I was 21. But like I say, that one tape didn't have to go on parade in the morning. Just had to make sure that they went on parade, you know, and were on time and that, and it wasn't a problem. And then the days when you went in the army, you went to basic training camp. It was 2 or 3 months of hard training, as if you were getting trained to go into conflicts and that. And that was pretty tough. And then after that, you went to a trade school, you know. And then once that was finished, then you were sent to, where I was sent to the headquarters of RAOC. And I was just there maybe a month, and I was called into the captain there, and that's what he said. He says, "I was awarded a princely sum of 3 shillings and 6pence extra a week on top of my 17 shillings. So I was making about £1 a week at the beginning. It went up to a little more after that, but very little more. There was good times and bad times, and the good times were friends I had made on outings with the corporals. One time we had a corporals outings to Epsom Downs to see the Derby, the horse race, the Derby. I always remember that. I never saw a horse yet. It was, I think there was over 100,000 people at Epsom Downs at that race, and all you saw was the top of the heads bobbing down. We also had an American Air Force base station very close to where we were, a Women's Army Corps, WRAC, Women's Royal Army Corps. They were stationed in the same area as us. They had a battalion there, and I always remember that on Saturday night, if you were an NCO, if you had a rank of any kind, you could go to the mess with these ladies, women's soldier wear, and they had a dance on Saturday nights, and privates weren't allowed. But at the American Air Force Base, we had a dart team in our part, and they would come to us once a month, and we would go and visit them. And when we went, it was American 10-cent night. In the UK, it was called 10-cent night. All drinks were 10 cents, and everything was 10 cents. And of course, we as guests never had to pay for any of it. So that was kind of some of the fond memories. And some of the bad times were basic training was pretty rough. I saw grown men crying, couldn't make it, and they were made to make it. They were made to finish. Some of them finished maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours after the main batch was in, and they came struggling in, and they would cry very, very long and hard. They were married, they missed their wives, and they were national service, same as me, you know, they were called up. The wages were not very good. It was very low. And of course, during basic training, you didn't get out of camp. You couldn't go anywhere. And then when you went out...
What did you have to do for basic training?
We had, of course, it was all fitness training, you know, route marches and obstacle courses and different things. And then we were trained to fire. It was pretty new at that time. It was called the Belgian FN rifle. And you were trained how to use it and how to dismantle it and everything else. And when you got into where you're stationed, where you were going to be stationed at first, the uniforms they gave you were new, but the webbing on it was never been used, but the brass was so black and had to be polished, and the boots had like a little pattern over this part of your boot. That had to be off, and it was only brasso and maybe some fine wool. But one fellow had the idea to bring an iron that you could plug in, and we used the iron to get rid of all that had to be done in basic training and that. And you had to learn to march properly, to salute properly. And one time we were actually inoculated. There was a bit of a trouble in Kuwait, and we thought we might have been shipped out there, but that kind of passed over, and we didn't go. No.
What did you do after your time in the military? What was your career when your military time was finished?
The policy in Edinburgh, when you do an apprenticeship and then you get called up for the army, that job is always there if you want to go back to it when your time in the forces is finished. So I went back to Lay Laundrew in 1962. I got married, and my wife is from Switzerland, so we got married in Switzerland. And then in 1965, we had our first little child, and she was 1 year old, and we emigrated to Canada, 1966.
How would you say that your service and experiences have affected your life?
It affected me to appreciate what the Army has done if you work at it, if you work hard at it, and you obey the rules, because there's no other way to do it. You have to obey all the rules and regulations. And if you learn to live with that, you can make new friends, new places. Taught me that nothing is ever really as bad as it seems.
What does Remembrance Day mean to you?
Well, it means just what it says, remembering all the people who sacrificed their life, who fought for this country and other countries, and all the Allied countries. And if you look at a little bit of history of the Canadian forces during the conflicts of First World War and Second World War, there was over 2 million Canadians involved, and about 120,000 never made it back in the two world wars. When you see somebody who's like a senior time-served military man, whether it's Navy, Air Force, or Army, and you see all these ribbons, they didn't buy these ribbons at Walmart or Woolco or anywhere. They were awarded them for their feats and their bravery. Britain, Australia, France, they all celebrate Armistice Day or Remembrance Day. It was called Armistice Day originally because during the First World War, I'm sure a lot of you know that, maybe your students don't, I don't know, but during the First World War, the 14-18 war, on, of course, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, they signed a treaty with Germany, the Allies, to finish the war, and that was an armistice. And that's why, for years and years, it was called Armistice Day. Of course, now they've changed that to Remembrance Day because there's more conflicts, there's more wars, and there's more to remember of all those Canadians and Allied troops who fought and died for this country and their country.
You'd mentioned seeing all the ribbons and the medals that have been awarded. What can you tell us about the medal that's pinned on your chest right now? Oh,
I have a medal that when you're national service, you only get maybe 1 or 2 medals unless you've been in conflicts. And the medal you get is just a medal saying you've done 2 years national service. This one was awarded to me by our president of this branch, Diana, when I became a 50-year member of the Royal Canadian Legion.
What role does the Legion play in the lives of veterans today?
The main role is to help our veterans, you know, any veteran or dependents of veterans who need help. The Legion is always there, and a lot of people maybe be too proud to ask, but they shouldn't. They shouldn't be too proud, because if they've done their service and they need help, then the Legion is here for their help. Plus, the Legion helps with bursaries to all kind of sports and sports teams and different other things that the Legion does.
Are there any other comments or anything else you'd like to add, or anything else you'd like the students to hear?
To remind the students that if they can get a chance, maybe not this year because of the pandemic, if they can get to a cenotaph and listen to some of the stuff that's said there, they will have maybe a better understanding why we keep in our memory Remembrance Day and what it stands for, and the people who sacrifice their lives to make our lives better.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, our senior brass quintet will perform The Last Post, followed by 2 minutes of silence. There have been many people who have contributed to today's virtual commemoration. Thank you to our special guests, including veteran Gwen Settle and Jim Roger, and our piper, Mr. Shaw. We are honored to have your participation today. Thank you to our Student Council co-presidents, Joy Wu, and Wreath Layers Graham Best and Vincent Ma for being a part of the observance. Thank you to Mr. Bradshaw and the band and choir students for your performance. And thank you to our technical crew for all of your setup, lighting, and sound. Finally, to our remarkable alumni, Megan Hinkson, Felix Sung, Shahab Oshadari, Eamon Ma, and their crew, a huge thank you for putting together another outstanding production. Finally, we would like to acknowledge all our viewers, whether watching in class or online in your personal time, for your respectful attention throughout our commemoration, and we ask that you continue to wear your poppy with pride and dignity. Thank you, and good day.
Fight, Pretty Carrie! Fight! By the rights, quick! March!